Often it is more about figuring out where are those points where you feel that the ATO has understood some of the facts but not all of them. Hi, I'm Michael Buscema and I'm the practice lead for tax disputes at Aptum. Today I'm answering your questions on objections and tax disputes with the ATO. When would I lodge an ATO objection? I think for clients it's important to ask yourself at the outset, do I actually disagree with how the ATO has calculated what I owe or what they say I owe? Or are you more concerned with the fact that you've reported something and you might not be able to pay it to the ATO? While they might seem subtle, they're actually very important questions to ask. If you fall into the former camp of disagreeing with how the ATO has come to determining what you owe, then you might be able to lodge an objection. Now that's not for every type. It's typically where the ATO has made an assessment of what you owe. So examples could be the ATO has issued you an amendment following audit for income tax or GST or superannuation guarantee charge. Objections can also be lodged if the ATO has made an assessment for a penalty because there was a shortfall of any of those amounts. If those situations arise for you, then the next step of the dispute process following an audit decision typically would be to lodge an objection with the ATO. How do you raise an objection with the ATO? It's actually relatively simple, but there are some key things that you need to make sure you get right. So there is actually a particular form that can be used. Alternatively, you can write a letter, but you need to make sure that letter contains the same things that would be in those forms. But basically, the ATO would have made a decision. You need to set out your details, or if you're a representative, your details as their representative. You need to set out fully and in detail the reasons and the grounds why you disagree with that decision. And importantly, there are actually certain things you need to declare around making sure the information you provide is true and correct. Making sure you get those simple things right are important because at the moment, the ATO can take quite some time to get to objections. You don't want to find a few months down the track that there are those easy things at the start you could have gotten right and proceed with your objection quicker. That is the first step in lodging an objection. And from there, we can look at and we can discuss in more detail what information you might want to provide in support of that objection. What makes a strong ATO objection? Often it is more about figuring out where are those points where you feel that the ATO has understood some of the facts but not all of them, and what information do you have that we can put together and present to fill the gap in that story. And often the activity of doing that and explaining that story will go a long way to resolving your dispute with the ATO, and the objection is the path after audit to be able to do that. What makes an ATO objection fail? What makes an ATO objection fail can often be when either a taxpayer or their advisor in particular get caught up with why the ATO came to the decision they came to. And that can go one of two ways. That can go in the way that you get stuck disagreeing with how the ATO has applied a law or a technical position. And sometimes that's appropriate, but most often that's not the core of a dispute. You might look at how the ATO has viewed all these facts and they've come up with a story about you and be tempted to want to pick apart that story. Unfortunately, that's not the most effective way of dealing with the ATO at an objection. Basically, an objection is the opportunity to have someone independent of the audit area consider your case afresh. So the best way to take advantage of that opportunity is to look at all of the information you have at hand and present that in a way that explains your story such that an independent person can come to a different view potentially than what the auditor did. What happens if I miss the deadline for lodging an objection? This commonly happens. There is the possibility to request an extension of time to have your objection considered, given that you only have 60 days following an audit decision to be able to object. You can have compelling reasons to be able to get an extension, but I would stress to taxpayers that once you've received your audit decision, if you are considering taking further action, get that advice quite quickly. While we can make an application to extend time, it's not a guarantee, and you don't want to run the risk of not being able to take that path simply because you thought you could get an extension. How long does an ATO objection take? Taxpayers need to be aware that an objection can take a very long time, and it is not uncommon for an objection to go over a year, and for complicated matters, it can take years. There are ways that you can approach an objection to try to shorten the period of time of that objection. And the best way to do that is also the best way to have the highest chance of getting the resolution you want. And that is making sure that you and your advisor talk about What are the issues where you are critically opposed to on the ATO? And often they involve an absence of evidence before the ATO to be able to make a decision in your favour. So if you're able to collate information and documentation on discrete points or critical points and present those to the ATO in a timely manner, they often go a long way to help shorten the period of an objection, because often an objection is extended simply because there is a request for information or documents that goes back and forth over a very long period of time. Can I amend my tax return instead of lodging an objection? Whether you choose to amend your tax return or lodge an objection comes down to two basic things. If you've made a mistake in your tax return, or there's an omission of something in your tax return, the general approach is to lodge an amendment provided you're within time, which depending on your circumstances is generally between 2 to 4 years. If you're at the point of time where the amendment period has expired, or you disagree with how the ATO has come to a position on your tax affairs or applied the law to your tax affairs, then you'll be best off lodging an objection. There is a process where you can engage the ATO through their early engagement process if you want advice. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to call Aptum for advice. For immediate clarity on your tax dispute, contact Aptum.